Alhamdulillahi Rabbil Alameen. Wassalatu wassalam ala nabiyhi wa ala alihi wa sahbihi ajma'in. Can you hear me okay? There's a bit of a delay. Can you message in the chat if you can hear me okay? Yeah, you can hear me okay? Okay. So welcome to the second part of this journey of the soul, where we're going through, as we mentioned, the start or the journey of the soul right from the beginning. Before, when the souls were first created, we discussed a bit about that last week. And today we're going to discuss the soul in this life. And next week, inshallah, we're going to discuss the soul or how the soul is taken out at the point of death, and so on. Now, I have a couple of very quick points I wanted to mention before we start. The first one is, for those that joined in Ramadan, we went through Surah Al-Kahf. And alhamdulillah, the admin team have completed uploading Surah Al-Kahf. So if anybody wants to look through the tafsir of Surah Al-Kahf, they're on the YouTube channel now, inshallah. Also, in the last couple of days, a WhatsApp group was created. So I think there are 3 WhatsApp groups now, because it only allows a certain number of people, 250 or 60 people in each group. So there is a WhatsApp group where we're going to post updates and so on. So please do join that. I believe the link, inshallah, will be posted in the description or the chat. And the third point I wanted to mention is, so if anybody wants to, because we had a couple of messages, if anybody wants to help, wants to get involved, wants to volunteer, has any ideas, suggestions in terms of how we can improve or what we can do, if anyone wants to help in any way, whether they are in terms of graphics or design or whatever it is, then please do let us know. You can either message me on Instagram, or if you want to email admin@salimalazhari.com, I get the email address will be posted there as well, inshallah. The Menti code for today is in the chat and should be in the description as well. So before we start the actual discussion today, I want us all to go to Menti. We're going to start with a question from last week, just to make sure that we're all on the same wavelength, all on the same page. So if you go to Menti, we'll bring up the first question, please. So we'll give everyone a few seconds to get to Menti. Okay, and whenever you're ready, then we can start the first question on Menti. Remember, Menti, the key thing is not just the right answer, but the quickest person, or as quickly as you get the answer right. Okay, so the question should be up there. Which prophet was it that got the attention of Prophet Adam? Was it Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? Was it Prophet Ibrahim, or was it Prophet Dawood? Okay, so you've got 30 seconds left. I'll give you 10 more seconds before we start. Okay, and let's see the results, or I'll mention the results. So for the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam was 3 people, Ibrahim was 9, and the Prophet Dawood, as we mentioned last week, was the prophet that Adam alayhi salam saw, and he had a bright light, and this was the discussion we mentioned last week. Do we have the leaderboard? Does the leaderboard come up? That we can see where everybody is. Okay, so first place, I'll just mention it very quickly. Who's that in first place? I can't see the name. Jawad, brother Jawad was first, Rawan second, and Sister Tasneem, third. Okay, so remember that. It's going to keep changing as we go through. Now, today what I want to start with is actually one of the questions we had last week, which is, did the souls meet before this life? So did the souls, we mentioned the souls were created. We discussed about how Adam alayhi salam, we all came out from the back of Adam alayhi salam, every single soul. Did our souls meet at that point in time? So there's a hadith from the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, a very important hadith. The hadith is collected by Imam Bukhari, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, he said, Al-arwahu junudun mujannada, that souls are like soldiers, conscripted soldiers, that they recognize one another and they get along with one another, and those whom they don't recognize, they don't get along with. So the hadith says, if you know somebody, you'll get along with them, and there are certain people you may not get along with. Okay, now what does this mean? So according to the vast majority of scholars, it refers to people in this life. Good people are inclined to good people, and maybe not so good people are inclined to people of that similar nature as such. But there are a number of scholars, Ibn Hajar mentions in Fath al-Bari's explanation of Sahih Bukhari, that mention that this hadith possibly could have referred to the souls at that time. So before we were born, remember the souls when they were created at the time of, or thousands of years ago. And those scholars, they mention that, but the souls could have potentially interacted then. And because of that interaction you would have had with souls of a similar nature then, those are the people that you have affinity and love for in this life as well. So that there is that view, and Allah knows best, of course, as to exactly what happened, but that does seem also plausible. And one of the things they mention is a hadith or a narration where Aisha radiallahu anha, she says that there was a female who used to live in Mecca. Now she used to joke a lot. And what happened is then she traveled to Medina. So she went from Mecca to Medina. And when she went to Medina, she stayed with a woman who also was similar with her that used to joke a lot. And then when Aisha radiallahu anha heard this, she said that my beloved, meaning the Prophet ﷺ, has spoken the truth. And she mentioned that hadith, al-arwahu junudun mujannada, that souls are like soldiers, that they attract and gravitate to one another. And so again, implying how we can understand that hadith. One other point I want to mention about the hadith, about how souls are like soldiers. Soldiers in an army have different levels, different ranks. So for example, you will have a lieutenant. You may have, for example, a foot soldier. You may have a general. They all are part of the army, but they also are slightly different. Now, many scholars, they refer to this and say that we as people, we are all people, but we all have slightly different traits, slightly different personalities, characteristics, if you like. So if we look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, we find that, he was a leader. You look at Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, he was, for example, often, commonly known as someone soft. If you look about some of the friends, we mentioned WhatsApp. Think about some of the friends on one of your WhatsApp groups, or one of your Telegram groups. You will have people in your group who are maybe more creative. So maybe you have an idea in your head, and you want to be able to put it down to paper or to be able to draw it or design. You have maybe some friends who are maybe more into seeking knowledge. So they're the type of people that will post in your group reminders or videos, for example. So we're all slightly different, and we have different personalities, and there's nothing wrong with that. And it shows that this was right from the beginning of the time, even when, in terms of our souls, how our souls are different. Now, the next point I want to mention is, what exactly is the soul? Okay, what exactly is the soul? The vast majority of scholars say that the soul is a physical aspect. Okay, is a physical aspect, just like, of course, it's inside us. So just like we have water, or water goes or flows inside a rose, or oil flows inside an olive, it's something physical, just like that. There is a second view, Imam Ghazali, Imam Razi, a number of great scholars, they mention that it's not something physical, rather it's something just pure essence as such. Okay, and so when we look at, for example, last week we mentioned about how the soul is has to do with blowing, And so the majority of scholars say that something that requires blowing means that it has to be physical, to be blown into our bodies as such. And one of the things that's common in the Quran is you will find various words for soul. You will find the word ruh mentioned. You will find the word nafs also being mentioned. So are these two the same? Are they different? How do we understand this when we read the Quran and we see different words? Because part of what I want to mention when we're going through this is not just, as I always say, not just a theoretical knowledge. It's ruh, or the word says nafs. We want to know what it means. So let us go to Menti and we'll go to our next question. Get ready. Remember, fastest answer. Okay, so what's the difference between the ruh and the nafs? I'll give you a few seconds. Is there a difference or is it the same? Okay, yeah, so that's better. Are the ruh and the nafs the same? Okay. Three, two, one, coming up. Okay, and so the answers, right, so that's quite interesting. So the answer is essentially yes. Okay, and I'll explain this. And most people actually got this wrong. But let's get the leaderboard very quickly. We'll see who's doing what on the leaderboard. So on the leaderboard we have, and it comes up. Okay, well, we've got a new leader. So number one at the moment is Sister, it's changing, Sophia. And then we have number two is Sister Amy, and number three is Urwa. So in fact, number four is a sisters or brothers. What's happening? The top four answers are sisters. Okay, right. Back to the question now. So are the ruh which can be used interchangeably? Okay, and I'll mention why. So there's a hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, we're going to mention this next week, in which the Prophet ﷺ, he said in Sahih Muslim that when the ruh, when the eyes or the ruh goes up and the eyesight follows it. So the word here, key point being ruh, was used. Another hadith, also in Sahih Muslim, but by a different narration, by Salama, that the nafs goes up and the eyesights follow it. So essentially the same hadith, but two different words. One narration mentions ruh, one narration mentions nafs, meaning essentially the same thing. Okay, so that's some of the reasons that meant the majority of scholars mention. However, when they're used together, they are often used in different contexts. Okay, so the word ruh is used when the soul departs from the body. Okay, the word ruh generally refers to when the context here is often used in the Quran when it departs from the body. Nafs refers to when the soul is inside the body, like we are living now. So nafs refers to when we are the soul inside the body. And I'll give you an example. So they're interchangeable, but have used in slightly different contexts. So for example, I could say, I'm wearing a top. Okay, now a top, it could be a jumper, for example, or it could be a hoodie. Now, they're both the same, to be tops, but they're used in slightly different contexts. So for example, if it's cold, I could say I'm wearing a top, I'm wearing a jumper. If it's raining, maybe the context would be a hoodie, for example. So again, the same in the body. Ruh, the context is when it's being taken. I want to read out the next question, please. If we go to Menti. Okay, the question is, when describing emotions, what term is generally used in the Quran? Is it nafs or is it the ruh? Based on what I've explained before. Is it nafs or is it ruh? Is it nafs or is it ruh? What do we think? I'll give you another 30, or it says another 16 seconds left. When describing emotions, based on what I've said, so I've explained, a few things about the context. So think about the context. What do you think? When it's describing emotions, what term is used in the Quran? Is it nafs or is it the ruh? Okay, well, I'll mention the answer. Okay, good. So majority of people, mashallah, said nafs. Okay, and we'll bring up the leaderboard while I'm explaining it. So why is it to do with nafs? Because we said nafs refers to when the soul is inside the body. So here we're referring to emotions, whether it be somebody is patient, whether it be somebody is angry. These are things nafs is to do with inside the when the soul is inside the body, and the ruh, as we said, refers to when the soul often is taken out. So let's bring up the leaderboard, please. So I understand. Yep, I understand there's a bit of a connection problem. I think it's my internet might be playing up, unfortunately, but please do bear with us. Okay, so top of the leaderboard is Sister Amy. Then number 2 is Sister Urwa, and 3, mashallah, we've got a brother representing that, Muhammad Wahid is 3rd. Okay, right now. So emotions, often the word nafs is used, as I said, so to do with things like desires, passion, anger, self, nafs. Now, I actually want to, another question. If we can bring up the next Menti question, please. Okay, so get ready for the war. Is it at 120 days? What do you think? When is the soul blown into the body? I'll give you a little bit of time. Is it when the marital relations first happened, or is it after 120 days of when the baby or the fetus is developed? Right, so how long do we have left? Let me just look here. Okay, 3, 2, 1, and then we're going to go to the results. Okay, so mashallah, it's good to see people's, I can see the results here. So majority of people actually said 40 days. And the second common answer was 120 days. So the answer is 120 days. At 120 days, this is when the soul gets blown. We know this from the hadith in Sahih sallallahu alayhi wa sallam. He said that, Inna ahadakum yujma'u khalqu fi batni ummihi 40 yawma. That at 40 days, when the baby is just 40 days old, it's a small drop. Okay, nutfa is a small drop. And then it becomes a alaqa, which means after another 40 days, so day 80, it becomes a clot of blood. And then after another 40 days, it becomes a mudgha, a morsel of flesh, a bigger piece of flesh, if you like. And then the Prophet ﷺ said that at this point, on day 120, this is when the angel is sent, and the angel blows the soul into that body, into the baby's body. The hadith collected by Imam Muslim and also Imam Bukhari as well. So after 120 days, this is when the soul is blown into the body of the baby. Picture this in the journey if you're getting confused. Last week we discussed before we were born. This week we've discussed about when the soul is blown into the body, which we said is at day 120. Now, what happens when we go to sleep? Okay, what happens when we go to sleep? Because there's a famous verse in the souls are taken at the time of death, and also the souls are taken at the time of sleep. Okay, the souls are taken at the time of death and also at the time of sleep. So what does this mean? This means that when we are asleep, okay, when we are asleep, the soul is taken away in a slight way. It doesn't depart from our bodies. It doesn't depart from the bodies. It's still there, but it's allowed to wander. So for example, let's say you have a house and you have a garden. So if you're standing inside your house, you're standing inside your own property, okay? If you're standing in the garden, you're still inside your property, but you've moved slightly. And that's the same with the soul. Like the soul may be, in our bodies, but at nighttime, it just moves slightly. It's allowed to wander slightly, but it's still connected to our bodies. It's just as, when you're in your garden, you're still connected to your property. It's still what you own, but but it doesn't leave your body. Key point. Party, they overslept. They overslept and they missed the prayer. Now, just as we, they were humans, we are also humans. It happens, all the time that, somebody sleeps and you miss Fajr, you oversleep, for example, you set your alarm, but for whatever reason, you didn't hear it. This happened. Sallallahu Alaihi Wasallam, he said that Allah took your souls when he willed and he returned them when he willed, meaning that they were taken out slightly, not taken away completely. That's the key point. The soul only gets taken out of your body completely when you die, okay, or when we die. But there's still a connection when we're sleeping, but it's just removed slightly, or it's allowed to wander. And when we blink or when we wake up, for example, our soul then goes back to how it was before. Okay, so what I want to do is I want to go to one last mentee. I want to one last mentee. If we can bring up one last mentee, please. Bring up the next mentee, please, the last one. Okay. How many types of souls are there? How many types of souls are there? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? We'll give another 20 seconds. Is it 1, 2, 3, or 4? Okay, let's see the results. Okay, if we can bring up the results, please. Okay, so it's actually split. So some people said 1, some people said 2, some people said 3, and they're actually very similar in terms of the percentages. The answer is 3. There are 3 types of souls. Now, next week, inshallah, I know there's a bit the connection issue, but next week, inshallah, I hope we don't have this issue again, but we'll explain the different types of souls and how we can purify our souls. And this is a key point as well, how we are able to purify. So what can we do to achieve a pure soul?